Welcome to a ride on the outside. MMA is full of people on the inside, but what about the ones that watch from beyond? Welcome to the MMA Outsiders with Tom Albano and Zain Bando on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
And here we are for episode 71 of the MMA Outsiders. It's a super episode, unlike maybe what the MMA community might be feeling after a lack of a UFC 300 ad at the Super Bowl. Tom Albano here along with Zain Bando. And Zain, hope you had somewhat of an enjoyment of the game, minus the fact that there was no 300 commercial. Minus how the first three quarters of that game was kind of lackluster. But we got a lot that we got to get through today. A lot to get through, so little time. UFC 300, all the madness with that. We're about, Zain, 2 months away. Actually, exactly 2 months away. And as of the time we're recording this, we still do not have a main event. We've also got UFC 298 that we got to run through. We've got action this past week that we're going to mention. All that and so much more. Before we do, make sure that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified of everything here at the Empty the Bench Network. Make sure to follow us across social media on Facebook, Instagram, and the former Twitter, now known as X, at MMA Outsiders ETB. Do the same for the Empty the Bench Network at ETB Network, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. To my right, as always, my co-host, Zain Bando, staff writer for BJPenn.com, MMA Knockout. You can find his work on social media at ZanBando99. And then, of course, on Tom Albano, contributor to MMA News, Fan-Sided MMA, and going to be returning, now it's official, Zain, with the PFL for the 2024 season. So you can catch my work for their website for every PFL card, the global card, every PFL Europe card, and now every PFL MENA card. And you can follow me on social media at Thomas J. Albano. And once again, shout out to Wolf Spreads, our partner who they partnered with the network through the Football Friday program around week 9, and they are still running through now. We have expanded the partnership network wide. So now that even football season is over, we can still, have this partnership. We can still talk the great things that we have with them. We had a lot of fun with them during football seasons, and that action can continue into baseball season, basketball, the second half of the basketball season, second half of the hockey season, and so much more. So
for sure,
2,000 fantasy dollars every week. You can bet in a little pool, fantasy bet in a little pool with your friends. Whoever makes the most fantasy profit wins the week. So much fun.
For sure, it definitely keeps you very invested in whatever game you're watching, and it also kind of helps in terms of just learning more about the betting space and how you place lines and all that good stuff. So anyone who wants to learn more about Wolf Spreads, be sure to download it, be sure to check it out, be sure to familiarize yourself, and hopefully, assuming that everything kind of expands its way outward, we're going to start to use Wolf Spreads more succinctly and concurrently with this show. So stay tuned for more information on that as it rolls out. But one of the most entertaining things I think to do in the combat sports space is to throw a little action on. And so hopefully in the near future, we'll be able to do that. But with all that and so much more out of the way, we have a whole lot to get to, starting out with all the, I guess you could say, news, notes, and hoopla that is and was the UFC 300 mess that was this past week. So Ariel Helwani went on the MMA Hour yesterday at the time. This is he went on the MMA Hour yesterday to kind of clear the air on what was going on with UFC 300, and essentially what Ariel Helwani said is that what Dana White has been claiming over the last week is true. The UFC still does not have a main event for the blockbuster UFC 300 card, and as we said, it's about 2 months away, taking place at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. But there has been a new development, and that is for the UFC welterweight title. What the UFC wants to do is Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev, not Bilal Muhammad. The only issue with the UFC potentially not announcing that fight sooner than what they would like to do is Chimaev's visa issues and not get it to get to the United States at this point in time, or at the moment is having issues that is holding him up for making this fight possible. So it seems like the UFC really wants to push Khamzat. They think that he's the next worthy challenger in the line for Leon Edwards, even though Bilal Muhammad is the clear number one contender. There's, I think, a lot of underlying layers to unpack. So, well, I guess I'm going to throw it to you. Essentially, what I'd like to know first is, when you saw Ariel talk about this, had Hamzat crossed your mind even before he mentioned him, number one? And number two, do you think the UFC potentially going in that direction just clearly shows that they think that Chimaev is more of a star than Muhammad, and you think that this is the fight that they're actually going to try to push as much as they possibly can? Why not?
Okay, so Chimaev didn't really cross my mind, Zan, because I had assumed, and even Nasruddin Imavov, I believe, mentioned it last week during his post-fight press conference, that the plan. I thought the original plan had been that Hamza Chimaev was going to fight Jared Cannonier next, and then that fight was going to supposedly be the one that elevates him to the title shot. I'm feeling that maybe Bilal Muhammad may have done enough, ranked above Chimaev in the rankings. And Zan, the welterweight title, this is a situation where I don't think the UFC has a clear cut winner. Because do I think that they view Chimaev as a star? Absolutely. They viewed him as a star, Zan, after he fought twice in 10 days, got finishes in both, and then in early September of 2020 had that very quick, under 30-second knockout of Gerald Meerschaert. They have always viewed him as a star. Even when the whole weight issues that happened in September of 2022, their view of him didn't exactly go down. They viewed him as a star. Even after the long layoff that happened prior to that, remember when he had COVID and was teasing about retirement? They view him. It doesn't matter. They view him as a star. They view him as a star more than Bilal. And Zan, if you asked, for lack of a better term, because I know this term gets thrown around, people hate the term, but for lack of a better term, if you ask the casuals, they'll know Chimaev more than they'll know Bilal, or they'll think that Chimaev is more exciting than Bilal. So you have those who are in the Chimaev camp because of his star potential, and you got those who maybe a little more hardcore. And I'm in this camp, the Bilal camp. That Bilal has done enough. He's had the win streak, has the wins that the wins over names that he's earned this shot. Plus, Zan, don't forget you also have the storyline with Leon Edwards, because the one time did not win, and the one time he did not win, and I think the same goes for Leon. That's a little blemish on their momentum, is the no contest that they had when they faced off, because of the no contest, because I think it was an accidental headbutt, if I'm not mistaken, or may have been elbows. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
it was definitely one or the other for sure, and I think you hit all of the proper points. I just think personally that at this moment in time, despite Hamza Chimaev's star power, Tom, I don't think he deserves this fight right now.
I agree.
Has he maybe has one good win on his UFC resume, maybe two if you want to count Kamaru Usman, but to me, he has not done enough consistently at 170 or 185 pounds.
I'll
To,
counter that, Zan. No, I'm not saying I'm going to counter you, but you say the arguing that, oh, he's got to win over Usman. I'll counter that to anybody who says that's a quality win. Yeah, it's a win by name, but also Usman was fighting on short notice because Paulo Costa pulled out of that fight on short notice, and that fight took place at middleweight. Usman had never fought at middleweight before.
and you have to look at the fact that Usman, admitted before the fight that his knees weren't in the same condition that they once were, that the Leon Edwards trilogy fight took a lot out of him. There were a lot of variables outside of him just being a last minute replacement
Hmm.
that caused him to not perform as well as he normally does. Yeah.
So I mean, I think I'm in the same camp as you. Uh, actually, hold on. Producer Pat coming in with a little research. Well, I should say research. It's a little, I guess, sort of breaking development or such. So, as we're recording this, Chimaev, Zan, has replied to a comment on Instagram. And it says, I will not be fighting during Ramadan.
Yeah,
Well,
that is definitely another layer of this because Ramadan is the fasting holiday in that culture, so that makes all the sense in the world as to why he can't, as to that he will be unable to compete.
so this story now gets even another layer to this. So Khamzat Chimaev, little bit of a breaking development, at least at the time we're recording this. He has said on Instagram he will not fight during Ramadan, which means now, like, visa issues or not be damned, he's out. A fight between him and between him and Leon Edwards, or even him and Dricus Duplessis, is not happening.
Well, at least for this event, we're not saying that it can't happen down the road because it certainly he
Oh
could,
no,
but it will- but at least for UFC 300, he's definitely out. Yes.
so this is now a problem because then it goes to what I talk about. Now, part of just all of this and the other part to all of this, let me just go to this one. Let's just go to this layer of the story. So there was an expectation, maybe a little bit of a tease, if you will, on social media. One that was maybe or maybe not fueled by one Irish proper 12 whiskey, drinking, producing, alcohol going through his blood and veins. Vince McMahon style walking man known as Conor McGregor may have fueled these flames. That there may have been a commercial or such of a UFC 300 announcement. Now Dana White was in a commercial for Bud Light that had a whole bunch of cameos, a whole bunch of celebrities. They even had the people from the commercial, like they say at the end, I wish I was at the Super Bowl, and then you got to see everybody from that commercial in the Super Bowl. And there was a thought maybe there'll be commercial or in that commercial some sort of Easter egg that would have announced the UFC 300 fight, but Super Bowl came and went, and there was no announcement. And there's a lot of fan outrage at this point as to what's going on.
Yeah, so speaking of no announcement, a bunch of people on the MMA Twitter/X webs have done their research and someone, I don't remember who it was that caught this, found out on the ESPN schedule that a Q&A for UFC 300 is scheduled for Friday on the same day as the ceremonial weigh-in. I'm just curious, in your opinion, Tom, do you think that by Friday of this week you will have an official announcement, or is this going to be a Q&A, in your opinion, for the fights that have already been announced?
I think we have to. Zan, I'm gonna go one step. I'll go another step further. If
Okay.
if by, let's say, so today is the 13th. The next week will be the 20th. Then the 27th. If we get to that last week of February, Zan, if we get to let's say the UFC Mexico City card, we get to that and we don't have a 300 main event announcement. We're going to be entering UFC 293 Sydney territory where we're freaking out not knowing what the main event is.
Yeah, or perhaps them having to move the date entirely too. So
This is not a good situation. Now, should we have expected a UFC 300 announcement? I don't know. I
I don't
think the
know
problem,
either.
Zan, only because if you see that story there about Chimaev, and you see that story, I mean, all the stories about Conor McGregor, that he and Chandler were ready to go, but the UFC wanted to hold off as a means of boosting a weaker card down the line. And then the stuff about Jon Jones, which, I know we're going through layers bit by bit, but at this point we should just go to that because this plays a role into that too. So apparently, Jon Jones had an interview with Submission Radio in Australia, well, this past weekend, and during that interview, stated that actually, Zan, despite what the UFC has stated that they were looking to have the Stipe Miocic fight in late 2024, he would consider facing Tom Aspinall in an undisputed title fight. However, Jon Jones was looking to go. Jon Jones was asked about main eventing UFC 300, but felt he would not be ready. Obviously, he's still recovering from his torn pec that he suffered that forced the cancellation of the planned 295 main event between him and Stipe. And Zain, number one, going back to this part of the story, if it's not Jon Jones and it's not Conor McGregor, it's not Chimaev, if it's not uh anybody coming out of retirement, not a Diaz brother, not Khabib Nurmagomedov, you're not going to be able to have a big, payoff or Super Bowl commercial. If it's Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad, no disrespect to either of them, you can't run that during a Super Bowl commercial. If you're going to say you can't run a commercial for UFC 300 based on Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway for the BMF title, you can't do it with Leon and Bilal. And secondly, Zain,
No.
and secondly, this story right here, and the reason I have it as a separate segment to this overall picture, the fact that Jon Jones, who is still recovering from a torn pec,
Mm-hmm.
and you had stated you wanted to, even though it was going to be at most a year, but still a while, because the UFC still wanted to do the Jones Stipe fight, and now all of a sudden after that submission radio, that smells to me like desperation.
Yeah, that smells to me like desperation too, and another layer that you did not add, but I think part of the reason why they wanted Jones to headline is because they know that if they try to run Aspinall versus Pereira, that it won't sell as well as a Jon Jones fight, is because Jon Jones is a bigger name to the casual audience compared to those two guys who are two great fighters in their own right. But as far as what we know about them right now and the way that they're marketed, it seems like they cater more to the hardcore audience than the casual audience. So that's also another element. And they probably did not want an interim championship to cap the card. That's the last thing they want. So,
But at this point, I think we can recognize we're running out of options if by that logic.
yeah, we're running out of options, and they had 10 months to figure this out when 300 was, anticipated, and people started to talk about it, and now they're in scramble mode.
Yeah.
If I
To
were
the
the
point
UFC, if
to
I
the
were
point
the, sorry, go ahead.
to the point where Dana White has commented that a whole documentary could be made about the behind the scenes for that card.
Well, and speaking of the documentary, I'd rather watch the documentary than the countdown to UFC 300. To be,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. All
yeah,
right,
I'd
go
rather,
ahead with what you were saying
I'd
before.
rather, I'd rather watch that. But anyway, what I was going to say was, if I was in the war room and I was a matchmaker, I think the easiest thing that you could do to make everyone happy is, and I hate to say it because we did an entire Ultimate Fighter season around it, but the only fight that I think makes sense for this card to put at the top of the card is Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz 3.
And it's funny that you say that because I believe Nate was in the crowd for the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
Rooting for the Niners, of course.
So I
So
think people went in, and Sam, it goes back to this part of the story. I think part of the outrage is because they saw that they know the desperation the UFC was going in after the Jon Jones story dropped. I think people were expecting that the UFC, with their desperation and Dana and Nate both being at the Super Bowl, that was going to happen. They were going to announce the Conor Nate trilogy for 300.
yeah, and unfortunately they didn't, and they still have yet to do so. So I guess I'm gonna ask you the same question. I gave who I think should be the main event if I was in this position. If you're the UFC right now, given the options that reading between the lines are on the table, and you were in this position of power, and you had 2 months to go to figure it out, what would you do?
Uh if I was Zan, I'm in the same. As much as I'm not the biggest McGregor supporter, I would be in the same boat as you to try to get Connor there. I mean, Zan, if I had all the power, Connor versus Chandler would have happened already. It should have happened last year. Let's be
Yeah,
honest.
it should have happened at UFC 296.
At minimum 296. But you look at this, and Zan, I actually want to go back to Ariel's story for a second. So
Okay.
just to clarify, because to get the fuller picture here. So Leon Edwards, Khamzat Chimaev was the top plan for the UFC. Leon Edwards versus Bilal was another option, as was DDP versus Chimaev. I think I'm still in the same boat as I told you a couple of weeks ago, Zan. Maybe this is just out of pessimism. I think Leon versus Bilal is going to end up the main event of that card,
Really?
unless there's another bout on here, and you want to
Okay.
talk about star power and draw and a heated fight. Zan, if you're telling me to go into this situation in the situation of it's in now with all the
Okay.
scramble, I would pick, I would write, blank check or a significant check. I would mail one to Dricus du Plessis, and I would mail one to Israel Adesanya, and you get that fight for 300.
Yeah, I mean the buildup would be spectacular, and I think MMA fans would go insane. There would be flights being booked within seconds of that.
I think at this point,
I-
Zan, I think at this point that's what you do. You go. There's one name that we talked about. He said he wasn't going to fight in a while, but we said if he was offered a lot of money, he would do it. So I would be on the phone right now with Israel Adesanya, and I would say, how much? How much is it going to take for you to do this fight at 300?
So that it's yeah. So when Friday of this week rolls around, is that going to be the fight? Is that what we're going to get?
I, like I said, I'm from a pessimistic point of view that I think it's going to end up Leon Bilal because of the Chimaev news. But if I was the UFC, I was Dana, and I need some star power for this main event. I need something, Zan. As much as it's a fake belt, you have to think about it in this way. Gaethje and Holloway, you need something that's going to top their star power. And being a heavier weight class. And at this point, going through all those options that aren't going to be it, the only name that sticks out to my mind right now is Izzy Adesanya.
Okay. So, that's kind of where we sit in regards to the madness that is UFC 300. We will keep you guys posted, of course, every single week leading up to the blockbuster event. Again, that's UFC 300, April 13th, Las Vegas, Nevada. T-Mobile, who could already begin to make your plans to pick that up on ESPN Plus pay-per-view if you will not be in attendance. Anyway, let's talk about actual fights
Yeah.
because can we not? Because obviously we have UFC 298 taking place in Anaheim, California at the Honda Center. UFC Featherweight Championship, Alexander Volkanovski versus Ilya Topuria. And yesterday, just for you guys in the United States, just a little programming note. Yesterday was the final day where you could save $10 on the pay-per-view as an ESPN Plus subscriber. So if you took advantage of that, congratulations. You are all set for Saturday. If not, you will be paying full price for this event. Nonetheless, a major championship fight to above this card. And overall, UFC 298, the amount of depth that is on this card is really tremendous after the lackluster UFC 297 that was. And we aren't really sure what Alexander Volkanovski we're going to get, considering that he's now lost twice to Islam Makhachev. Obviously, he came back in a major way and defended his featherweight title in between those fights. But what Alexander Volkanovski are we going to get, considering some of the things that came out of the Islam Makhachev rematch, how he wasn't fully prepared, and with Topuria being 14-0 with the whole country of Spain behind him and a lot riding on that, potentially a UFC event in Spain later this year. What do you think the stakes are of this fight, and how do you look at this fight holistically, just from a main event perspective?
Yeah, and first of all, Zam, by the way, you mentioned the early bird special. I actually managed to get that just before we went on the air today, so I'm all set.
Fantastic.
I'm all ready to go. Also, by the way, second to last pay-per-view, you can do the password sharing. Eventually, that's gonna run out.
Yeah, unfortunately, I know.
But anyways, going to this fight here. Yeah, I think Zan, the biggest question I have about this fight. Now I know Ilya Topuria taking on somebody like Volkanovski, that's definitely a step up in competition. He hasn't fought Max Holloway, who we consider Zan the quadruple A fighter of the weight class. Um, but I think I have more questions than about Alex Volkanovski than I do Ilya Topuria. Now, part of that, Zan, I think stems from, listen, I know the two fights that he had with Makhachev were at lightweight. It was the heavier weight class, so you can't really penalize him at the featherweight level. But I'm concerned considering some of the comments that he made in the aftermath of that fight, talking about how he feels an obsession that he needs to continue to be in there. And he's coming into this fight, just I can't even say 4 months because 294 was later on in October. So about 3.5 months after that knockout. So there's to me quite a concern. Are you going, from one badass in the lightweight division to an up and coming rising young badass in your own division?
Right. And to put it simply, to me, this fight shouldn't be happening now. This fight should be the co-main event of UFC 300 in April. That's just that's just me. I mean, to push him that hard and to give him such a quick turnaround, which is what he wanted, but to have all this pressure on you to be the featherweight champion, to not look at your best in an entirely different weight class, and with the current momentum that Taporti is on after beating a very tough, gritty veteran in Josh Emmett.
Hmm.
This is not a very good situation for Volk. However, I do think that even though Ilya Taportia was able to go 5 rounds in the Emmett fight, or pretty close to it from what I recall, he's fighting a totally different beast in Volkanovski. Volkanovski
Yeah.
has dominated 145 since 2019. I think experience is experience, and even though we have our doubts on whether or not Volk still has it, and whether or not he's lost a step, I still think he wins. I just think it'll be closer than maybe people will give him credit for.
No, I agree with you. Like I said, Ilya, there's a difference between, you know, like I get that Josh Emmett was fighting for an interim belt against Yair Rodriguez last year. And Max Holloway technically shouldn't really be in the title picture because he lost the rivalry with Volkanovski. But that said, remember what we talked about with the quadruple A fighter again, that Max has run through everybody in the division, even Yair, who won the interim championship, who Volkanovski beat. It's just a matter of that. Ilya never got the shot. Ilya got the shot against Josh. We never really got to see what he would do against Max Holloway. Now, is it fear from the UFC's perspective that, oh, if he goes in there with Holloway, then Holloway, with his quadruple A status, might stop him, and then that ruins anything, and we need new challengers for Volk. Maybe that does play a role.
Maybe.
But at the same
Right.
time, you can't deny, the submission of Bryce Mitchell, the going 5 rounds and getting the win over Emmett. That does put a lot of stock in Ilya. However, like you said, Volk is a different animal. I'm gonna go with Volk still. I think Zan, as you said, I completely agree with you. It's gonna be a lot closer than people think. I think that it's going to end up being, it's going to end up having a couple of scares where I think Tapura is going to take a couple of rounds. I could see Volk winning this 3 rounds to 2, 48-47. The thing that's going to scare me a little bit, Sam, the thing that's going to concern me, and I think I need to watch out for, at least I want to watch out for, considering what we just talked about with the quick turnaround, how is Volk going to react if Tapura lands a big power shot on him?
That's going to be a big question. Is when Volk got hit against Islam, he didn't like it and he fell almost instantaneously. So, um, yeah, and when you get hit by Ilya, you are hurt and you are definitely on wobbly legs, and that's going to be very interesting to me. He's going to fight. To me, this fight could go one of two ways. This is either going to be this is either going to be Aldo versus McGregor, or where Taporti it tries to just take the center of the octagon and knock him out right away, or this is going to be a methodical, dominant win, very similar to each when Volk beat Yair, where there was no question as to who the better fighter was when that fight was over. I think this fight can go multiple different ways, but the longer the fight goes, I think the more it favors the champion, and the shorter the fight goes, the more it favors Deportia, because Deportia wants to keep this on the
Oh,
feet.
San, yeah, I completely agree with you on the shortness, but like it goes back to what you said before. If Ilya lands a power shot and Volk stumbles and goes down like he did against Islam, even if the fight isn't finished right away and Tapuri has to land follow up shots, like if he goes to his knees, I'm just gonna say it's over at that point. I know he survived that crazy submission against Ortega, but like you said, the health is just really the concern at this point.
Mhm.
Um, Continue on with what you were gonna say. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, just to wrap up, I was just going to say I'm picking Volk by a fourth round TKO, but I would not be surprised if this goes the distance. But either way, I think that the featherweight champion will be going back to Melbourne, Australia, and will wait for whenever his next challenge will be. Because my prediction is that after Volk wins this fight, he's going to sit out until International Fight Week. He's going to fight June 29th against whoever that's going to be, which that's even going to be a very interesting challenge if he wins this one. And if he wins in June, this is just a hypothetical. I think he fights. I think it's going to go this weekend, so February, then June, and in October, and we look ahead to 2025 to see whether or not he's still the champion or not at 145. That's what I think.
All right, so then let me ask you about Ilya. Let's what happens should Ilya win this fight? Now, if and I think this can go a couple of ways then, because number one, let's say the finish is late, or let's say the fight goes to a decision. We would assume with a Volk rematch, correct?
Hmm. Yeah,
What happens?
I mean, with the way Volk is dominated 145, there's only one guy that would deserve an immediate rematch, and it's the man himself. Yeah.
But what happens in a situation like you said before, if it's like Jose Connor and it's quick? Because Dana has a history of when it's a boring fight or a quick fight, they'll go, I don't know, that was too quick," and they don't give him the title shot. Because then, Zan, I would say then an obvious challenger would be the man that Ilya has skipped over in Max Holloway. But now you've got Max fighting Justin Gaethje, which is already a concern that I have because I don't know if he wins that fight because we saw Max at lightweight against Dustin, and Max is too small for lightweight. So, what
Hmm.
do you do with Ilya then if the fight goes quick and Dana pulls a Dana and doesn't give Volk the rematch?
I think no matter what happens, even if it's quick, the rematch still happens. I think Volk's body of work and what his future Hall of Fame legacy is going to be. There's no way, no matter how he loses, and if he does lose, that he doesn't get an immediate rematch.
All right, fair enough. And then, Sam, we go over to the co-main event, and we go to Robert Whitaker taking on Paulo Costa. Zan, I'm gonna give a bit of a take here.
Okay.
I don't know if this fight happens.
Okay.
I, it would tell me it would not be a Paulo Costa thing if he pulls out during fight week.
Of course, it would be the most Paulo Costa thing ever because that's what he likes to do. So,
If Paulo, I'm gonna go on this extreme take, Zan. If Paulo Costa pulls out of this fight, he should do us all a favor and just retire.
you should
Honestly,
retire, or the UFC should just cut him.
at this point, it's gonna be ridiculous. And Zan, considering that it's felt like forever since Paula's had a impressive performance, let alone fight. At this point, Zan, as much as they're both, higher ranked middleweights, and this is a co-main event slot, I'm not going to be too in depth on my prediction. I think Robert Whitaker wipes the floor with him. I think he wins. I don't think he finishes Paulo. Yoel Romero didn't finish Paulo in their, crazy fight that Paulo won. I don't think he finishes, but I think Robert sweeps the scorecards easily. 30-27 across the board.
Okay, I think the fight is a little bit closer, but I still think Whitaker wins. So I'm going to go with the similar prediction as you, but I think it's going to be 29-28 on two and 30-27 on another. And it's simply going to be it's whoever scores a 30-27 is going to be watching a totally different fight. So, so yeah, I think it's gonna be somewhat close. I think that if it does go the distance, I think Costa is able to manage a round, but that's it. He's gonna showboat like he normally does. He's gonna try to stand in the center of the octagon with his arms down and try to get Whitaker to come to him, and he does. Costa's gonna do the thing that he likes to do, where he just pretends that he's not fighting, and then he's just gonna stay stagnant. So that's gonna
Then
be
let
a
me ask
whole.
you: Do
It's,
you
it's,
think Do you think he's gonna go into this fight drunk on wine like he was against Izzy?
No, I don't think so. I think he's learned his lesson from that, and I think he'll go into the fight 100% sober. So I'm gonna say no.
Okay, all right. Let's go on to actual talents. Let's go to Jeff Neal and Ian Gary. Now, Ian Gary, this is gonna be his first fight since that win against Neil Magny and Zan. That was probably the most disappointing performance I've ever seen from Ian Gary. And I know the UFC is very high on him. I know they're trying to give him, the Irish train treatment like they did with Connor, like they're still doing with Patty. But I need to see more. I need to see something bigger than what he did against Neil in this fight with Jeff Neal.
I'm just gonna
I'm
put it
just gonna put
simply.
it simply,
I think
I
that Ian Gary's first loss of his MMA career comes this weekend, and I don't think it's even close. I think he's gonna lose.
Oh,
I think
actually,
I
something
think
to note, by the way, Zan. This fight was supposed to happen next month at 299, but for whatever reason, they decided to move it a month earlier.
hmm Yeah, I think who's this one? I think Jeff Neal is a veteran in the sport. I think he's a much better wrestler. He doesn't talk any trash. He's gonna go in laser focused, and Ian Gary's probably looking past him, thinking this is gonna be an easy fight, considering that some people think that Jeff Neal is a gatekeeper in that division, which he's the furthest thing from, and he's been one of the best contenders in the UFC for a while, and I think he's gonna prove it. And I think that outside of the first round, where Gary's gonna try to throw as many hands as he can. I think he's gonna get out wrestled, and I think he's gonna lose a clear 30-27 unanimous decision, and I don't think it's gonna be even close. So
Now, something to note about Jeff Neal, by the way, considering
okay.
the MMA math side of things, he actually has a loss to Neil Magny from May of 2021, and he's actually going to be entering this fight off of a loss against Shavkat from 285, which in that fight, it was absolutely fun. Neil lost by submission in like the final minute, but also Neil missed weight by quite a few pounds. So that's going to also be a big talking point. Because it ended up being a 175-pound catch weight fight because of the miss.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we won't have to worry about that going into this fight, but I think it's interesting that you know with that, because there's a chance that Ian Gary, when this press conference does take place,
He'll bring that up.
tomorrow at the time this is premiering, he's definitely going to bring that up, and he's going to try to be an instigator as much as he possibly can to get under Jeff Neal's skin, and who who's based on the vibe of the press conference, Jeff Neal could snap. But knowing how soft spoken and mild mannered he is, I doubt it will happen, and I think they'll keep it civil. But I think that Ian Gary's just here for the show, and that's about it. I mean, this without a doubt is his toughest test of his career so far. And if he can get through this one, he's going to prove me wrong exponentially for sure. But I just don't see it.
Uh, and Zan, I'll actually hold on. He'll probably producer Pat. He'll probably show up in the shirt that has Jeff's DUI picture. Oh my god! If he does that,
Yeah, I could see
oh
I could
god.
see I could see that. I could see that, and he could even end up getting booed out of the arena if that happens too.
I don't know if it's booed out of the arena. Knowing that it's Ian Gary, knowing that fan base, they'll probably cheer the living hell out of it.
Yeah,
That said,
or
Jeff Neal's
actually, there might be a mix now that I think of it.
Jeff Neal, anyways, Sam, you're right, is going to be his toughest fight. He's a tough grappler. He's got more power than Neil Magny had. I think Zan, it's going to be a little bit of a difficult night, and if Ian is not in the right mindset like you think it is, I'll agree with you. I think Jeff will take him down, will pin him against the cage, and will sweep the scorecards on a decision. I think this fight, even if Ian pulls off the win, Zan, I think it's going to be too close for comfort. And if if our predictions end up coming true, that doesn't spell good for Ian Gary when he taking on the top 5 of that weight class.
It sure doesn't, and it definitely will be interesting to see. And this is definitely a fight that the people, if you will, are tuning in for, because even though Volk is the main event, the people's main event, if you will, might end up being this fight when you look at the entire card from a bird's eye view, if you will. But
Well, Zan, if we're talking about the fights on the undercard that you consider your people's main event, maybe the people won't like this one, but Zan, this next one is the one I'm looking forward to most. It's Merab Dvalishvili taking on Triple C Henry Cejudo. This one I'm looking forward to.
yeah, this one has some heat on it, considering that Marab is still pissed that he does not have his long-awaited title shot.
But
Right?
Zan, that's his fault.
No, I know.
We
I
talked about
know.
this. Why did he not choose to agree to just fight Aljo?
I
Friends fight all the time.
uh, I know.
Andre Feely fought his friend last weekend,
I know.
Dan Ige.
I know. I'm just saying he probably still feels that way because he didn't get his way. If that makes sense. So they're giving him who he believes is the greatest combat athlete of all time in Henry Cejudo, and this is one of those fights where if Merab underestimates him, he could lose, and that's exactly what I think is going to happen. I think that when you get Cejudo at 100%, even he's been on the couch for the last year, all he does is just fight absolute studs every single time. But he just fights former champion or current champion almost every single time he steps in there. And I think we're going to see the Cejudo of old. And I actually think that he finishes Merab before the final horn, and Merab's quest at potentially competing for a championship. And I think that former championship experience is former championship experience, and it is nothing to overlook. And Cejudo has yet to lose a step, and arguably a lot of people thought that he won the Sterling fight before he decided to temporarily retire, and I think he's going to get back to his winning ways on Saturday, and give Merab a taste of his own medicine, and give Merab his first UFC loss in quite some time, in a fight that Merab can't afford to lose. And this is one that I just think that Cejudo kind of knows what his responsibility is by fighting him, and I think he'll go out and he'll deliver the goods and it's a lot of people. I have a couple of upsets on this card. I know that my record on predictions isn't the best considering what took place at UFC Vegas 86, but I feel extremely confident in this fight, and I just think it's hard to pick against a former champion. So I'm gonna go with Cejudo.
I'm gonna go with Merab first of all. I think Merab and Cejudo are gonna have a really. This is Zan what I'm eyeing on for a potential fight of the night. I know we said that about Merab and Peter Yan, and that didn't end up happening. But I think Cejudo has a good repertoire, a good skill set, if you will, a good move set that I think he and Dvalishvili can go toe to toe and produce a really competitive, close fight that who knows, maybe Cejudo, like the Sterling fight, you'll have an argument that he should have won, but the cards go one way, or even the reverse for Merab. I'm hoping and praying that this one is going to be fun. My question to you, Zan, is twofold. One, do you think the winner of this fight gets Sean O'Malley as long as Sean O'Malley beats Cheeto next month?
Yeah, I could see it. Yeah, I
Number
could.
two, number two, do you think the UFC is praying for either a boring fight or that Merab doesn't win so they don't have to book Sean O'Malley versus Merab? Because in my opinion, I think Merab would murder Sean O'Malley.
I think so too. I don't think the UFC's praying for it, but I think if they're not already devising backup plans, he should be, because if Merab wins, they're going to be back in the same situation they were a year ago. So
Correct. So I
That's
guess they're
all,
praying for. I guess they can say. I guess they're praying for a boring fight so they can try to hold that over Rob's head on that one.
yeah, unfortunately, I mean, if that's how they think of it, that's how they're going to do it. Even though it definitely is, definitely is unfair to say the least. But we're we're gonna be split on that. However, I think we might end up agreeing with the next two fights. But we'll see where your head's at compared to mine, because there's definitely these last two fights in the main card. To me, I don't know about you, but to me, these last two fights in the main card feel like absolute coin flips to me. So,
Yeah, these two do feel like coin flips. So we got Anthony Hernandez taking on Roman Kopylov. Zan Hernandez coming in 4-fight win streak. Last fought in May with a TKO of Edmund Shabazian, which, my God, Zan. Remember when Edmund Shabazian was the golden boy and he had all that momentum around his side? He just
mhm.
starts falling off completely.
Oh yeah.
Also has a finish against Marc Andre Barriol. Also has a win over former LFA champion Josh Fremd. And then you got Roman Kopylov, who comes in 12-2. Actually, is coming off a knockout win over Josh Fremd.
Mhm.
4-fight win streak of his own with a couple of actually all of his finishes in this 4-fight streak, Zan, have been knockouts. Pardon me. All of his fights, except for his pro debut, have been knockouts and TKOs.
Yeah, so to put it simply, this fight is not going the distance. If you were to do a best bet for this weekend's card, I think this is the best
This
bet that
fight
this
cannot
fight
go to
will finish
distance. Yeah.
inside the distance for either fighter, no matter how you want to do it.
Yeah, no, inside the distance. Zan, I'm leaning towards the power of Kapylov to put it away here. I think second, third round finish for Kapylov.
Yeah, I think Kabylov wins this fight too. I think he weathers an early storm in the first round for Hernandez, but comes back in the second round to get a late ground and pound finish after a wild scramble. And I think it will be one of the most entertaining fights on the card for sure. Yeah.
And then we have the featured prelim. Interesting matchup, Zan, that has me It's Amanda Lemos taking on Mackenzie Dern. Obviously, Mackenzie Dern coming off a performance which I guess the word Zan is pretty forgettable.
hmm But I think she's had a lot of time to reflect on that and understand where she went wrong. And I actually think that Dern gets it done. I think that she survives Wilmosh's early first round power, and I think he does enough to actually get she win by a submission in either the second or third round. I think this is going to be Dern's most impressive win of her career, and I think that Wilmosh is gonna rock her early and she's going to get caught in something, and then he's going to get finished. So I think that this is going to be one of the best women's fights of this quarter, and I think it's definitely one that I think people are going to be sleeping on because these were some high level non title contenders that I think people need to look out for this year or into 2025. That I think people are going to start talking about. If this fight goes the way I think it will. So I'm taking Dern to
All
start
right.
to end the prelims, if you will. So
I think Zan Lemos' power combined with the fact that I know she's 2-2, but in her last four, but those two losses are to Andrade and to Weili Zhang, and that was a title fight. It's her first fight since that title loss. I think
right,
that
and
experience.
right, and the reason why I said non-title contenders is they're still working their way back up to that upper
All right,
echelon of the division. Just to
all right.
clarify that.
Well, let me ask you: if Dern gets a win over Lemos, especially if it's a finish, does she get the winner of Weili versus Yang Janan?
I don't not yet. No.
Not yet. Okay, fair enough. Especially because I think if Yan Janan somehow defeats Weili Zhang at 300, then the next step would be a rematch. I think.
And I also think that if Wei wins, the UFC will want to do a
Maybe
super fight of
Valentina
some
fight,
sort.
or
Yeah,
if Valentina ends up winning the trilogy later this year,
1,000%. Yeah, yeah.
or Or yeah, you could have her just go up to 125 anyway, even if Valentina isn't the champion. Do Whaley versus Grasso. That's also
Mm,
another possibility.
absolutely, either way. Yep.
Uh, yeah, but have a little more faith in Amanda Lemos's power and her momentum. So, and her recent victories and such. I'm gonna go with Lemos. But I agree with you, Zan. I don't think Durd's gonna get the win, but I think that this is a fight that I think people are sleeping on a little bit and deserves a little more attention.
So then I guess to clarify your thoughts, do you think this goes to a decision, or do you think there's a finish in this one?
If there's a finish, Zan, it would have to come in like the third round. I'm leaning to this one probably being a decision though.
Okay, and I guess and then I guess to follow up on that, do you think there's any sort of way that if this fight ends in controversy that the UFC runs this one back right away, or do you think the UFC moves on?
I wouldn't mind seeing this one right away again if controversy happens. I don't think I would mind seeing that.
Okay, cool. Just to go over some quick news and notes before we get out of this topic. Congratulations to Tom. You know I have the overall picks record. You currently lead 27 21-2 to a 25-23 and record thanks to your 7-6 voting last week. So it is already becoming a
I wasn't
competitive
even proud of
race.
my performance last week.
Well, I'd say with how difficult the card was to pick, I think 7-6-1 is way better than 4-9-1. So I had to give you,
Oh,
I had to give you props were due. There's some cards where you'll do really well, and then there are other cards where you'll struggle. That was me this past weekend. So I'm hoping things change for the better very soon. But at the very least, our competition is still very competitive.
very
So
much so. All right, let's Zan. Quick few topics before we got it before we get out of here. Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia. They had a little scuffle in Radio Row. Had to be broken up during Super Bowl week, and it seems like their fight is now going to be official. Title fight on April 20th. Zan, I'm looking forward to this one. I think Haney's going to have the upper hand, but I'm going to look forward to this one.
yeah, I'm looking forward to this one too. I'm looking forward to the build up even more. I think the build up to this fight is going to be great. I think there's a lot of bad blood when you look at the whole golden a PBC matchroom relationship, whatever you want to call it. To zone all the errors of all the stuff that Garcia said about Haney and all the stuff that Haney thinks about Garcia, what he thinks of his pretty boy image. I think I'm more excited for the build up than I am the fight, because I think that if Haney does what he needs to do, he should be able to win this fight easily and without even really thinking about much. How do you who think this fight plays out as we're about 2 months away from it?
Um, hmm. I think that you're right. There's going to be a lot of fun build up to this. I just think that Devin Haney has done more when in terms of getting over the hump than Ryan Garcia has. And I think Devin Haney has more momentum than Ryan Garcia has. And I think this is a fun competitive fight, but I think Devin Haney just has a little more in the skill set, a little more in the tank that he ends up pulling off a decision. That's my early prediction 2 months out from this fight.
For sure, and we'll preview this fight the week of, and as it gets closer with more developments. But that was obviously very interesting to see them scuffle already, as this fight was just recently announced. But at the very least, it's good for boxing because we have a lot of very exciting fights to look forward to, and in their build up and what have you. So it's nice to see that this fight is done, signed, sealed, delivered, and ready to go. That's for sure.
Then be Joe Pyfer, more like be Jack Hermansson. So Jack Hermansson and Joe Pyfer faced off in the main event of UFC Vegas 86. Joe Pyfer coming off very well in the first couple of rounds, getting the better in the striking exchanges, but it looked like the lack of 5 round experience got to him. He tired out. Hermansson had something behind his jab that was working over Joe well, and not to mention the calf kicks, and it looked like Joe just didn't have it in him. And then the 5th round comes around. He gets that really expletive filled motivational speech in the corner, comes out firing and looking healthy in the first couple of minutes, and then tires out again. And Hermansson gets the fight to the ground. And Hermansson pulls off the comeback decision, dropping the first across all three scorecards, Zan, dropping the first 2 rounds and then coming back to win the next 3, a la Dan Hooker versus Dustin Poirier from June of 2020. That was huge for Hermansson because it looked like people were writing him off. I know I wrote him off, and he comes out there, gets a win, and shows why he should still be a ranked middleweight.
Yeah, I mean, he continues his win-loss trend, but without a doubt, he did what he needed to do. But he'll still be in that top 10 discussion. He beat a guy that what the UFC was really pushing. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Pyfer next. But this is a fight where if you're a Jack Hermansson, you're supposed to win in a fight like that. You're supposed to win a fight against a highly touted prospect, and he did just that. And given all the shifts and changes in the middleweight division, given that Dricus Duplessis is the new champion, given that Israel Adesanya and Sean Strickland are still out there, and given that the top 10 is still one of the most fluid in the UFC, there's a lot of options for what Hermansson can do next. And his 2024, to say the least, will definitely be very interesting. And I could definitely see him either headlining another fight night card or being a main card attractive bout on a UFC pay-per-view. Well, maybe somewhere international like England or the United Arab Emirates, but he's definitely someone to keep an eye on, and he's definitely someone that certainly hasn't gone away given his age. Well, good for him.
He actually, Zan, during his post-fight press conference, was talking about a couple of opponents that would make sense for him. So he talked about Imavov as being a potential name in there, which would be, I think, an 8 versus 11 matchup. Are you interested in seeing Imavov versus Hermansson?
Oh, of course, absolutely. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how Imavov would handle Hermansson's boxing ability, and I think it would be interesting to see how Hermansson would handle Imavov's ground game, which to me I think is very, very underrated and definitely a fight that I would be interested in seeing. I think it would be a human chess match to say the least.
Absolutely. And hopefully a better fight than Imavov's last one against Elise the week before.
Right. It's weird that he's already talking about Imavov of when he had just fought in the same building 7 days prior. So it's funny how that works, right?
Yeah. It almost seems like it's lined up perfectly, like one of the media members said. Last one, Zan. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Now, I don't mean a good wow. I mean, oh my God. This was controversial, and if you didn't think controversial, this was disappointing on so many ends.
Yeah, I think this fight, you can come to the proverbial conclusion that top-ranked boxing on Thursday nights just isn't a good business model. Let's just get that out of the way first. What do you think? I don't think it works.
What business model? I'm sorry.
Top-ranked boxing events taking place on linear ESPN, specifically on Thursday nights.
Thursday night? Yeah, no. That threw my whole week off. I can't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But as for the fight itself, it wasn't the Teofimo Lopez we were used to seeing. I mean, and even Jamaine Ortiz had his flaws, but this fight was just absolutely horrible. It was not what either of these guys are capable of. It was not the fight that people were expecting it to be, and just some of these scorecards to me were a little off. And
117 to 111. Come on.
It's just like, really, in 2024 we're still doing this, but
I know. But Zan, listen to this, and I think this is just an omen of what direction Teofimo Lopez is going in. It's not one.
Okay.
It's not one to go in. So he beats Vasily in October 2020, wins the lightweight championships, the WBA, WBO, and IBF. He didn't win the WBC. No, he didn't. All right, so he has that win. Doesn't fight for about a year. Has that controversial split decision loss against Kambosos. Fights in August of 2022. Defeats Pedro Campa and has to go to the 7th round. Sandor Martin, split decision. Josh Taylor, Taylor's the exception. He got the win in that fight and it was a pretty clear win. And then this horrible Jamaine Ortiz fight. Ever since that win over Loma, Zan, it has been an absolute awful run for Teofimo. He does not look like it's like that win over Vasily seemed to legitimately be his peak because ever since then it's been downhill. Even with wins in those fights.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see where he goes next. And I think if that fight gets replayed 100 times, I think it's a lot more even than people expected. If that's the Teofimo Lopez that's going to continue to show up, and if I was a diehard Teo fan, I would be just as disappointed. This is definitely not the Teo that we remember during COVID. This is definitely not the Teo that beat Loma. This is a completely different version of him, and hopefully he figures it out soon. He's still relatively young, but his older boxing years are starting to get to him a little bit. He needs to either pick it up now, or his legacy will always be known as the guy that after the Loma fight just did a lackluster fight after lackluster fight, and no one wants to see that. So
Absolutely not.
definitely a lose-lose situation for Top Rank. Any other way you slice it or dice it, but I guess on a positive sense, boxing you get more free ESPN airtime, which I guess is always good when you have a packed sports week. So
For
there's
sure.
that.
All right. That's going to do it for us. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified of everything here at the Empty the Bench Network. Make sure to follow us across social media on Facebook, X, Instagram at MMA Outsiders ETB. Follow the Empty the Bench Network, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at ETB Network. Make sure to go to youtube.com/ETB Network to subscribe. We just passed 674 subscribers. So we thank you all for your support in our climb to 700 and beyond. That's for those of you who are listening on our audio-only platforms. If you are watching us on YouTube, don't forget to take MMA Outsiders and all the other ETB shows on the road with you on Acast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so much more on audio-only platforms. Don't forget to go to etbpodcast.com for more content, including more information about the network, blogs from some of our contributors, and so much more. To my right, as always, is Zain Bando, staff writer for BJPen.com and MMA Knockouts. Make sure to follow him on social media at ZanBando99. I'm Albano, contributor for MMA News, Fansided MMA, as well as with the PFL for their 2024 season for their website for live results. And you can follow me on social media at Thomas J. Albano. And I want to give a shout out actually to Pat Dana, our producer behind the scenes. Make sure to check his work out over at Combat Sports UK. And don't forget to follow him at Pat Dana MMA. All right. And one more thing, shout out to Wolf Spreads, our sponsor as always, with the expansion of our partnership from Football Friday to the whole ETB network. Make sure to check it out if you want to get, a little education in sports betting. If you want to have some fun with your friends with fantasy sports betting, you can definitely check them out. They are a great bunch of people over there. Shout out to Wolf Spreads. I think I got everything, Zan.
I think you did. And that is going to wrap up episode 71 of the MMA Outsiders. We hope you enjoy the fights this upcoming Saturday from Anaheim, California. We will break it all down and so much more on episode 72. But until then, enjoy the fights. Be Joe Pyfer, and we will see you guys all soon on the other side next week for episode 72 of the MMA Outsiders. See you guys soon and have a great evening.
Have a great evening, guys. We'll see you next week when we recap 298 and we preview the PFL Bellator Showdown.
That's exactly right.
Can't wait. See you then.
See you then.